Grace and peace to you from God our Creator and from Jesus, the teacher of our faith. Amen. I'm going to make an assumption here that most of you have had the opportunity to go to a wedding. Right? Safe bet? I think most of you probably have. I have. Actually, in my line of work, I get to go to a lot of weddings. Since becoming a pastor, I've had the joy and the honor of marrying well over 100 couples. It's basically a small town. And I think that in my career at weddings, I've seen just about everything. I've seen the best man hand me the 2 rings together to present to the couples to place on each other's fingers, and the bride's ring had gotten stuck inside the groom's ring, and they're standing in front of God and everybody. We're up there trying to pry them apart just before they place them on each other's finger. It's very romantic when you have to do that. I've seen the 2 young sons of the groom who were standing up for their father's second marriage get into an argument over which one got to stand next to Dad and start wrestling on the chancel during the wedding. I've seen ring bearers and flower girls just stop in their tracks or take off in the wrong direction or just decide to sit down in the middle of the aisle and watch from there. I have seen the attempt at using the beloved family dog as the ring bearer. That didn't go well. I've seen and I've learned. I've learned that there is this mythological idea of what a perfect wedding is, and that while we almost never nail it completely, people will go to almost any length to try and achieve it, because they love and want the very best for the bride and the groom. So, when Jesus' mother tapped him on the shoulder when they were celebrating at a wedding reception and said, "The couple has run out of wine," Jesus whispers back to her, "Well, what concern is that of you and me? My hour has not yet come." Well, I envision that Mary just gave Jesus the look. You all know the mom look, right? Yeah. You see, Mary knew what Jesus was capable of, and Jesus knew that she knew. And Jesus is saying, "Mom, this really isn't our problem, and besides, I'm not ready to go public with who I am just yet." Now, it's interesting to me that Jesus was resisting what seemed like a small favor. Interesting that he wanted to hold back. The exact phrase he used was, "My hour has not yet come." But in the world during Jesus' time, running out of wine, especially at a wedding, was not a small problem. It was a disaster. Wine was the only option besides water. There was no Red Punch, no Coca-Cola, no Sprite Cranberry, no other options. Wine was also an important wedding symbol. Wine was seen as a sign of God's great abundance and blessing for the couple. For the wedding party to run out of wine would have been considered a bad omen for the newly married. Now, I don't have any evidence of this, but in my mind's eye, when I imagine the scene, I'm pretty sure that Mary just kind of rolled her eyes at Jesus and then looked over at the nearest servant and just said, "Do whatever he tells you to do." "Really, Mom?" "Fine." And so Jesus points to 6 large stone water containers. Each could hold up to 30 gallons. "Fill these to the brim with water." And they did. "Now take one to the steward and have him draw some out." And when the steward dipped his ladle into the jar, wine, good wine, the very best wine, came out. 6 big 30-gallon jars, a total of 180 gallons of fine wine. That measures out, by the way, to close to 1,000 bottles of wine. "Fine, Mom. You want wine? We've got wine." And now it's all public, and everyone knows. This wasn't a part of Jesus' original plan. And Jesus' words tell us that he had some kind of a plan, some kind of an idea for how he would reveal himself to the world, a world that he knew was going to have a hard time accepting him for who he was. Jesus had things that he wanted people to know, to learn, to understand, but in his time frame. Jesus had wanted to be strategic. Now, for Jesus, opportunities for his people to learn had always been an important part of his mission. He was, long before this first public miracle, he was a rabbi. And rabbi literally means teacher. Jesus was a teacher of the Jewish faith. But this became then Jesus' first opportunity to reveal that he was more than simply a rabbi. His teaching would be different. And it was critical. It was about who he was and what he would be about. This would be the most important lesson that he taught to date. And Jesus wanted to be very intentional with how he shared it. He knew that he was about to take the people's faith and turn it on its ear. Jesus had much to teach, and God's people had much to learn. We still do. That's why the word learn has a prominent place in Trinity's mission statement. Let's take a look at it. It's printed right on the front of your bulletin. You want to pull that out just at the top, that graphic. We're going to read that out loud together. Everybody got that in front of you? Okay. Here we go all together. We'll read, "Through Jesus' love, we welcome, connect, learn, and serve." Okay, we've been doing this for like 3 weeks now in a row. We're going to read it one more time, but this time try not to look at it. See if you can do it by memory. Ready? Here we go. Through Jesus' love, we welcome, connect, learn, and serve. Awesome. Now, when God created humans, we were wired to be learners. Humans have a natural curiosity. Have you ever watched an infant, maybe one who's just learned how to crawl? They motor around the house, grabbing and picking up anything they can. And where does it go? Right into their mouth. Well, they do this because they're exploring and learning, and that's the only way that they can take it all in, use all their senses. When our boys hit that stage, for Lori and I, life pretty much became a foot race. No, not that. Not the cat. No. We are all instinctive learners, and that instinct stays with us. It's an unconscious instinct. But at some point, the rational side of our mind takes over, and we decide that in certain areas of our life, we've learned what we need, and we can stop now. We all forget that we're never done learning, never done growing in our faith. I think sometimes we assume that once we're confirmed, it's like bread popping out of a toaster. We're done. But Jesus reminds us today that we all have much to learn. The forming of our faith is a lifelong process, and we need to embrace our natural curiosity about the way that God works in the world. We need to stop, look around, and discover why God does what God does. We need to continue learning. We need to continue growing. So what was the very first thing that Jesus wanted his people to learn? What was his highest priority? What was he being so strategic about? Well, Jesus' very first miracle was to provide more wine, more joy, and more blessings than this couple or any couple could possibly have imagined or deserved. 8 or maybe 10 bottles of wine probably would have done the trick, but Jesus provides almost 1,000 bottles, symbols of God's goodness, symbols of God's blessing and abundance, symbols of God's love. Jesus is telling us This is what grace looks like. The love of God is so much more than we need. It is overwhelming. It is 1,000 bottles to fill an 8-bottle need. Well, this was the very first thing that Jesus wanted to reveal, because he knew that grace was the very first thing that we need to learn. And still to this day, truth be told, grace can be one of our biggest faith hang-ups. It is so hard for us to get our mind around the idea that we cannot do anything to earn God's overwhelming, absolute, and abundant love. This grace, it is the foundational understanding of our faith. It comes from God, and there is more than enough, an abundance. And on this idea, everything we learn about God and the path of discipleship is built. Jesus reminds us that this is just the beginning, that there is more to learn, that we build off of this grace. Through Jesus' love, we welcome, connect, learn, and serve. God calls you to be the curious learner that God created you to be. Explore the ways that God's overabundant gifts of grace work in the world and within your heart. To learn and have our faith formed is to acknowledge that we aren't at the end, that life and faith is a journey, and there are important truths yet for us to discover. This is what our teacher, our rabbi, Jesus, teaches us. And this is our mission. Thanks be to God. Amen.